My friends, life is full of people who enter our hearts, but not everyone who enters deserves to stay. Some come to nurture us, and some come only to play games with our emotions. The question is not whether people will try to manipulate you. It's whether you are wise enough to recognize it and rise above it. When someone toys with your emotions, they are not revealing your weakness. They are exposing their own immaturity. Outsmarting such a person is not about revenge, anger, or ego. It's about clarity, boundaries, and self-respect. Let's reflect on 8 timeless principles that can help you rise above emotional games and stand strong in your dignity. When someone tries to play with your emotions, the natural instinct is to react immediately. Anger, hurt, frustration, they rise like a storm inside you. But here's the truth: when you react instantly, you hand over your power to the other person. Think of it like a puppeteer pulling strings. The more you jump, shout, or cry without thinking, the more you prove that he is in control. Outsmarting begins the moment you step back, breathe deeply, and decide, I will not be rushed into reacting. Many people misunderstand silence as weakness, but in reality, silence is strength. Imagine someone throwing a ball at you. If you catch it, you've accepted the game. But if you let it drop, the game ends. When a man pokes at your emotions, he wants to see how quickly you explode. But when you remain still, thoughtful, and observant, you confuse him. He no longer knows what buttons to press because his tricks no longer guarantee a reaction. Observation is the art of stepping outside your emotions for a moment and studying what is truly happening. Ask yourself, why is he saying this? What does he gain if I react? Is this a pattern or a one-time slip? These questions turn your mind into a mirror rather than a battlefield. Once you start observing, you realize that not every action deserves a reaction. Sometimes people reveal more about themselves when you just let them speak without interruption. Think about a wise teacher in a classroom. The noisy student tries to distract, to provoke, to make others laugh. But the teacher smiles calmly and continues with the lesson, never giving attention to the disturbance. Slowly, the class sees who is wise and who is foolish. The same is true in life. When you observe instead of reacting, you allow the manipulator to expose himself while you remain in dignity. Another benefit of observing first is clarity. In the heat of emotions, we exaggerate situations. A careless word feels like an insult. A delayed message feels like rejection, and a small disagreement feels like betrayal. But when you take time to observe, you begin to separate fact from imagination. You see the situation for what it truly is, not what your hurt heart is whispering to you. This clarity is what prevents you from falling deeper into emotional traps. Finally, observation gives you time to choose a response that reflects strength, not weakness. Imagine a chess game. If you move impulsively, you lose. But if you study the board, you can see 10 moves ahead. In relationships, the board is made of words, actions, and behaviors. If you observe first, you can decide whether to respond with patience, humor, logic, or even silence. That choice, calm and intentional, is what outsmarts a manipulator more than any angry reaction ever could. One of the easiest ways for someone to manipulate you is by making you forget who you are. When a man plays with your emotions, he often tries to plant seeds of doubt about your beauty, your intelligence, your strength, or your value. If those seeds grow, you start believing that you are not enough, and that belief makes you easy to control. This is why knowing your worth is the strongest shield against emotional games. The moment you remember your value, you stop shrinking to fit into someone else's opinion of you. Your worth does not come from his compliments, his attention, or his approval. It comes from within. Think about gold. It doesn't lose its value if someone throws it in the mud. It remains gold. Similarly, your dignity remains intact even if someone fails to recognize it. When you are rooted in your own worth, you won't bend every time someone tries to test your limits. You'll stand tall, calm, and unshaken because you know your value is not up for negotiation. Too often, people allow emotional manipulators to decide how they feel about themselves. A man might give you attention one day and ignore you the next, making you feel special and then unwanted. If you don't know your worth, you'll ride this emotional roller coaster, desperate for his approval. But if you truly know your value, you'll realize his behavior says nothing about you. It only speaks about his instability. Your worth doesn't fluctuate with his moods. Consider a queen sitting on her throne. She doesn't run after anyone who walks out of her palace. She knows that her position, her crown, and her dignity remain whether people stay or leave. In the same way, when you know your worth, you don't chase after someone who treats you like an option. Instead, you calmly observe their actions and decide whether they deserve a place in your life. That is how self-respect outsmarts emotional manipulation. Knowing your worth also changes the way you communicate. Instead of begging for attention or pleading for love, you speak with clarity and confidence. You don't say, "Please don't leave me," but rather, "This behavior is not acceptable." You don't say, "I'll do anything for you," but rather, "This is who I am, and I will not compromise my values." When a man realizes that you know your value, he can no longer play with your emotions because you won't fall for crumbs of affection. You know you deserve the full meal. Finally, when you are aware of your worth, you naturally attract better relationships. A strong sense of value acts like a filter. Manipulators don't stay long around people who know their dignity because they can't control them. Instead, you draw towards you those who respect, cherish, and honor your presence. Knowing your worth isn't arrogance, it's wisdom. It's the quiet realization that you don't need to lower your standards to keep anyone, because the right people will rise to meet them. When a man is messing with your emotions, it often happens because there are no clear boundaries in place. Think of boundaries like the fence around a garden. Without a fence, anyone can walk in, step on the flowers, or pull out the roots. But when there is a strong fence, the garden is protected and only those who respect the gate can enter. In the same way, if you don't set boundaries in your relationships, people can trample over your peace and take advantage of your kindness. Many people are afraid to set boundaries because they feel it will make them seem harsh or unloving. But in reality, boundaries are not about pushing people away. They are about teaching others how to treat you. Imagine a house with doors. A door is not there to shut out everyone. It's there to welcome in the right people and keep out harm. Boundaries work the same way. They say, "I value myself enough to allow love, but not manipulation. Respect is welcome, but games are not." When you set a boundary, you are essentially saying, "This is where I draw the line. If you cross it, I will not engage." Emotional manipulators often thrive on testing limits. They want to see how far they can go, how much you will tolerate, and how quickly you will bend. But when you make your boundaries clear, whether it's through words, actions, or silence, you show them that you are not someone to be toyed with. This is not about anger, but about self-respect. Think of a river flowing peacefully. If there are no banks on either side, the water floods everywhere, destroying fields and villages. But with firm banks, the same water becomes powerful, even life-giving. Boundaries are those banks. They keep your emotions flowing in the right direction, protecting your heart from being flooded by someone else's drama. A person who respects you will never be offended by your boundaries. Only someone who wanted to exploit you will feel disturbed. Setting boundaries also means holding people accountable. If someone repeatedly crosses the line and you do nothing, your silence tells them it's acceptable. But when you calmly say, "This is not okay with me," you break the cycle of manipulation. Boundaries are not about controlling others. They are about controlling what you will and will not accept. That clarity leaves no room for games because the rules are clear. The beauty of boundaries is that they bring you peace. You no longer feel confused about how to respond because your limits are already defined. You don't have to over-explain, beg, or argue. You simply enforce the standard you have set. And when a man realizes that you have firm boundaries, he can no longer use your emotions as his playground. He knows that crossing the line means losing access to you. And that is one of the most powerful ways to outsmart manipulation. One of the most common tricks used by someone who plays with emotions is the art of sweet words. Words are easy. They cost nothing. They require little effort, and they can be dressed in charm. A man who wishes to manipulate you knows how to use words as bait. He may promise the moon, call you special, or speak in ways that make your heart race. But here's the truth: words without actions are empty. They are like a beautifully wrapped gift box with nothing inside. Outsmarting him means refusing to be swayed by words alone. Think about it. Anyone can say, "I love you," but love is proven not in speech, but in consistency, in care, and in sacrifice. Words may sound sweet in the moment, but actions reveal whether they are rooted in sincerity or just spoken to gain control. If he says he respects you but constantly ignores your boundaries, his actions cancel out his speech. If he says you're important but disappears when you need him most, his words are hollow. It's better to trust one genuine action than 100 empty promises. Sweet words often work because they feed a deep human desire. We all want to feel loved, valued, and admired. But here is the danger: if you cling to words alone, you might end up building castles in the air. Emotional manipulators use this weakness to keep you attached. They say what you want to hear, so you ignore what they actually do. To outsmart them, you must train yourself to step back and ask, does his behavior match his words? Let's take a simple example. Imagine someone promising you a meal every evening but never cooking. Would you continue to believe their promise after weeks of hunger? In relationships, we often do just that. We keep listening to promises while starving for real action. Outsmarting means treating actions as food and words as decoration. The decoration may look nice, but it cannot fill your hunger. It is the meal, the action that nourishes. Another important point is that actions are harder to fake for long. Words can be repeated endlessly, but consistent behavior requires real intention and effort. A manipulator may manage to say all the right things, but sooner or later, his actions will reveal his truth. If you focus on observing what he does rather than what he says, you will see his real character unfold. And once you see the truth clearly, the emotional games lose their power over you. When you prioritize actions over words, you begin to build your relationships on solid ground. Sweet talk will no longer intoxicate you because you know that talk alone cannot sustain love, trust, or respect. You become wise enough to wait, to observe, and to judge a person by the fruits of their behavior. And in doing so, you protect yourself from being trapped by empty promises and keep your dignity intact. When someone is messing with your emotions, the strongest move you can make is emotional detachment. This does not mean becoming cold, heartless, or unloving. It means refusing to let another person control your inner world. Emotional manipulators feed off your reactions. They want you to be restless when they ignore you, excited when they give you crumbs of attention, and broken when they pull away. But when you detach, you break this cycle. You no longer dance to the rhythm of their games. Detachment is like taking a step back to see the bigger picture. Imagine being too close to a painting. You only see messy brushstrokes, and it feels confusing. But when you step back, the full picture becomes clear. Similarly, when you're too emotionally attached, every word or silence from him feels exaggerated. But when you detach, you gain clarity. You see the pattern, the manipulation, and the truth that was hidden when your emotions were clouding your vision. Many people fear detachment because they think it will ruin the relationship. But the reality is, detachment saves you from being destroyed. It is not about leaving love behind. It is about protecting your heart from being dragged into drama. If a man truly cares, your detachment will not scare him away. Instead, it will make him realize he cannot take you for granted. If he only wanted to play games, your detachment will frustrate him because his control is gone. Either way, you win. Think of detachment as learning to control the remote of your emotions. Right now, when someone plays with your feelings, they hold the remote. They press a button and you feel pain. They press another and you feel joy. But when you detach, you take the remote back. You decide when to laugh, when to care, and when to walk away. This is not indifference. It is self-mastery. It is choosing not to be a puppet in someone else's theater. A powerful way to practice detachment is to build your emotional life outside of that person. Invest in your passions, your friendships, your spiritual growth, your career or your creativity. The more rooted you are in your own life, the less dependent you are on his attention or behavior. This makes you naturally detached because your happiness does not rise and fall with his moods. It comes from within you. Detachment also gives you the strength to decide wisely. When you are emotionally entangled, you tolerate behaviors that are toxic, thinking they are normal. But when you detach, you can look at the situation with reason rather than desperation. You can ask, is this person really good for my peace? Do I gain love here or only confusion? Detachment gives you the courage to make decisions that honor your worth, rather than decisions driven by fear of losing someone who doesn't value you. The moment you start begging for respect or attention, you hand over your dignity. Respect, love, and attention are things that should flow naturally in a healthy relationship. If a man is truly invested in you, he will give these freely, without being asked, without being reminded, and without you having to fight for them. But if you find yourself constantly pleading, notice me, value me, respect me, it is a sign that he is withholding them intentionally, or that he never had them to offer in the first place. Outsmarting him begins by refusing to beg for what you rightfully deserve. Respect is the foundation of every meaningful connection. Without it, even love loses its meaning. Think about it. What good is someone saying, I love you, if he insults you, ignores your feelings, or belittles your worth? Love without respect is not love at all. It is control disguised as affection. That is why begging for respect makes you lose twice. You lose your self-respect, and you gain nothing real from the other side. A wise heart knows that respect must be freely given, never forced. Attention works the same way. Someone who truly values you will not make you compete with others to be noticed. You won't have to chase his messages, beg for his time, or fight for his focus. Begging for attention only fuels manipulation because it shows him that he has the power to starve you and feed you whenever he pleases. When you stop begging and instead value your own presence, you take that power away. He realizes that you will not run behind him like a shadow. You shine on your own. Imagine a flower in a garden. It does not beg the sun to shine. It simply blooms, and the sun naturally graces it with light. In the same way, you should not beg a man to notice your beauty, your worth, or your presence. If he cannot see it on his own, his blindness is not your problem. Outsmarting means blooming in your own dignity and letting your self-respect attract the right light. Another truth is this: begging creates dependency. The more you plead for love or attention, the more you tie your happiness to someone else's moods. That makes you easy to manipulate. But when you stand firm and say, if you cannot give me respect, I will not stay here, you flip the script. You are no longer the seeker, you are the chooser. The power dynamic changes because he realizes you are not afraid of losing him, but he should be afraid of losing you. The beauty of refusing to beg is that it redefines your standard. You show him and yourself that you are not willing to accept crumbs when you deserve the whole meal. Begging is a sign of desperation, but self-respect is a sign of strength. When you walk with quiet dignity, people know that your love is valuable, your time is precious, and your presence is not something to be taken for granted. That energy outsmarts any manipulator because they cannot control someone who knows their worth and refuses to lower it. When a man is messing with your emotions, his biggest strategy is to keep you in a storm of feelings. He wants you to be angry when he pulls away, excited when he gives you attention, and desperate when he withholds affection. In that storm, you cannot think clearly because emotions cloud judgment. The smartest way to outsmart such behavior is to stay grounded in logic. Logic is like an anchor. It keeps you steady when emotions try to toss you back and forth. Think about a courtroom. Imagine if judges made decisions based on how they felt in the moment rather than on evidence and facts. Justice would collapse and chaos would reign. In relationships, it is the same. If you only rely on emotion, you may forgive manipulation too quickly, ignore red flags, or accept words without proof. But when you apply logic, you start asking the right questions. Does his behavior align with his promises? Is this relationship adding to my peace or draining it? Do his actions show consistency or only games? Emotions are powerful, but they are also temporary. Anger fades, excitement cools, and even attraction can shift with time. Logic, however, provides clarity. For example, if a man disappears for days and then comes back with sweet words, emotion may tempt you to feel relieved and forgive instantly. But logic will whisper, if he truly valued you, would he keep disappearing? If he cared, would he repeat the same behavior? That logical voice protects you from being trapped in cycles of manipulation. Staying logical doesn't mean ignoring your feelings. It means balancing them. Your emotions are signals, but they should not be dictators. If you feel hurt, acknowledge it, but then examine why you feel that way. Is it because he crossed a boundary? Is it because he deliberately pushed your buttons? Logic allows you to see the cause behind the feeling, not just the feeling itself. This way, you respond with wisdom instead of reacting in weakness. One powerful practice is to pause before making emotional decisions. When emotions are high, give yourself time to cool down. Write your thoughts, take a walk, or pray for clarity. This pause allows your logic to catch up with your emotions. A manipulator thrives on quick reactions, but when you slow down, he loses control. He cannot play with your heart when your mind is calm and awake. Finally, logic gives you confidence. You no longer feel confused or guilty about your choices because you have examined them with reason. When you say, this behavior is unacceptable, you're not just speaking from hurt. You're speaking from clarity. And when you choose to stay or walk away, you know it is not a decision driven by temporary feelings, but by truth. That balance of heart and mind is what truly outsmarts emotional games. Sometimes the strongest answer you can give to manipulation is not a fight, not an argument, but your silent departure. Walking away with grace does not mean you are weak. It means you are wise enough to protect your peace. A man who plays with your emotions expects tears, drama, or desperate attempts to hold on. But when you walk away calmly, without begging, without anger, you send a louder message than words ever could. You show that your dignity matters more than his games. Graceful walking away is about leaving without hatred in your heart. Anger ties you to the person because every thought of him keeps you restless. Grace, on the other hand, frees you. You don't need to curse him or prove his wrongs. You simply release him from your life and release yourself from his grip. In doing so, you demonstrate that your peace of mind is non-negotiable. Outsmarting doesn't always look like victory in debate. It often looks like quiet strength in letting go. Think of a bird escaping from a cage. The bird does not argue with the cage or fight with the bars. It simply flies away, and the cage remains behind, empty and powerless. That is what walking away with grace looks like. You do not waste your energy trying to fix a manipulator or trying to force him to see your worth. You recognize that his inability to value you is his problem, not your reflection. Instead of being trapped, you choose freedom. Walking away gracefully also means refusing to play the same games. If he ignores you, you don't ignore him back to get revenge. If he disrespects you, you don't lower yourself to disrespect him in return. You rise above the behavior and simply step out of the cycle. That contrast, his immaturity versus your maturity, shows who truly won, because the one who controls his emotions and choices always has more power than the one who is trapped in childish games. It takes courage to walk away, especially when your heart still has feelings. But grace is not about denying those feelings. It is about honoring them while also honoring your worth. You can acknowledge that you cared while also deciding that you deserve better. This balance is what makes your departure graceful. You leave with kindness, but also with firmness. You leave without bitterness, but also without hesitation. And here lies the greatest strength when you walk away with grace. You don't slam the door with noise. You close it gently, but you lock it firmly. That act tells him, and more importantly yourself, that your love is precious, your respect is priceless, and your soul cannot be held hostage by anyone's manipulation. Your quiet exit becomes the ultimate outsmarting move. Because while he expected to control you, you showed him you cannot be controlled at all.